Okay, hello, welcome everyone to tonight's November Innovation Division and Government Division webinar. You are in for such a treat because tonight we have the infamous Fredie More Franco Pablo that is going to speak to you about From Private to Public, embedding a culture of continuous improvement that sticks. He has been a guest speaker with us on our government division and our federal improvement team summit, as well as has a great relationship with our other panelists. So tonight you are in for such a treat. A group manager for operational excellence, experience across quality and compliance frameworks across many diverse sectors, a CMQOE, Lean Six Sigma black belt, and just a phenomenal operational excellence practitioner and leader. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Fredie up to our virtual stage to kick off tonight's session for you. Welcome, Fredie.
Thanks, Dr. Rhonda. And again, really happy to be with you all tonight. It's actually just around 11 in the morning here in Sydney, Australia. And again, thanks to the ASQ Government and Innovation Divisions for this opportunity to once again share this moment with you all, for me to be able to share my experiences, my knowledge in the field of continuous improvement, especially coming from the private sector, how we can take inspirations from it, from my projects and my experiences, and how you can apply this and adopt some of these practices in your own areas. So just before I proceed, can anyone confirm if you can see my screen? Is it presenting well? Yeah. Let me arrange my screen as well just to see if I would have some questions. Yeah, can see. All right. Thanks for that, Kathy. All right. So I've spent most of my career in the private sector working across different industries such as fast-moving consumer goods. I've worked also for pharmaceutical companies, packaging, and currently construction. Places that, if something goes wrong, it's usually noisy, messy, and very visible. And in those environments, the pressure to improve is constant. But what I've learned is that over the years, whether you're in a packaging plant, a pharmaceutical clean room, or perhaps government agencies as you would be, continuous improvement is all about the same things. Um, People, processes, and purpose. So, and just like in government, we in the private sector also face different challenges. Like changing priorities every time, different leadership teams coming and going into the company, tight resources, leadership turnover, and never-ending challenge of engaging teams who are just trying to get through the day. So today, I want to take you through to the playbook I built over the years, what worked, what flopped, and what lasted, so that you can keep your CI culture alive amidst all these issues. So, yep. Before I proceed, a little bit of background about myself, where I've been, what I currently focus on, how I share what I learned, and what I'm currently working on now. So where I have been, so originally I am from the Philippines. I moved to Australia in 2019. I have a chemical engineering background. In terms of professional experiences, I have more than 8 years of experience working in different industries. As I've mentioned, FMCG, packaging, pharmaceuticals, and currently in the construction space. I have helped companies deliver cost savings through lean, standardization, and team-led problem solving. Yep. Um, and then what currently I focus on, I turn continuous improvement concepts into something that is practical and more team-driven. I help teams building sustainable systems, like through common, simple lean methodologies or like tools like daily huddles, visual boards, and simplified standard operating procedures and work instructions. And I also help teams in improving their processes without them feeling overwhelmed or overworked. In terms of how I share what I learn, I have different platforms, but mostly and most importantly, the ASQ, or the American Society of Quality. So this is really one of the key platforms that I am able to share my experiences coming from the private sector to a lot of different variety of audience, not just in Australia, but all over the world, especially in the US. I was able to deliver keynote presentations focusing on quality, sustainability, and continuous improvement. I also have a newsletter, which I call Lean Goes Green, which practically aims to provide insights in the CI space from my experience and also industry case studies. Um, Currently, what I'm working on now is I am studying a PhD at Western Sydney University. My current research focus on using AI and optimizing manufacturing efficiency in the built environment. So it's a combination of lean data analytics and digital platforms to build scalable improvements in the industry. And also, I currently lead an ERP transformation program in supply chain. Yep. So that's about myself. Now, before we proceed to our focus for today, we have to set up like the challenge in the government setting in terms of making sure that continuous improvement culture sticks or is sustainable. So I have here, despite decades of improvement efforts, public sector teams still face deep-rooted structural barriers. And I have categorized these barriers into three buckets. So you have siloed systems and processes. You also have change fatigue and turnover. And the third one would be the lack of visible and sustained result. So this is your reality. You've got silos, competing priorities, outdated tools, and constant leadership turnover. And through all that, you're still being able to ask to do more with less, faster, cheaper, and cleaner. And we have to acknowledge that because unless we understand your context, we can't make continuous improvement relevant. So this is mainly going to be our discussion or focus in today's or tonight's webinar. How can we make continuous improvement doable and not just theoretically possible? So what I've seen between private and public sector continuous improvement, let's draw a line, between where I have been and where you currently are. So in the private industry, like change is fast. Incentives are clear, the link between effort and results is usually visible. Whereas in the government sector, this might be different, or the environment would be more complex. Like for example, in the speed of change, it would have, a slower pace, multiple layers of approval, and complex governance. In terms of leadership support, buy-in could vary from different administration to one another, tied to politics or short-term agendas. In terms of staff motivation, motivation is driven by service, stability, harder to link to outcomes. Whereas in the private sector, there's a little bit of more commercial incentives, bonuses that's tied to continuous improvement results. Resources, of course, there's always competing priorities, lean staffing, and limited funding to continuous improvement. And in terms of language of change, compliance, service delivery, taxpayer value, whereas in the private sector, it's more on the revenue side of things, cost savings, and how can we maximize value for the shareholders. So that would be the difference in terms of what I've seen in my research. Aside from that, the focus of today would be more on me sharing what I have done in my professional experiences working for different companies, the projects I've worked with, and what lessons I have learned, so that you could apply these lessons in your respective like teams as well. So firstly, standardization that stuck. So I had the opportunity to work for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies here in Australia. And in that role, I was able to lead a project that is related to our standard operating procedures. as simple as it would sound, SOP, especially in a very controlled environment or industry such as pharma, it's very important to make sure that the documents we're using are like useful, compliant, and reliable. So what the operators on the shop floor are doing should be reflecting what is expected out of them so that we minimize, like potential errors in the batch of medicines we manufacture. Deviations are avoided. So that would be the importance of having these documents really managed well. So when I've started with this company, there's over around hundreds of standard operating procedures and work instructions that were technically correct. But then the problem was nobody, or not most of the cost of the operators are using them, and we're also seeing issues with deviations in our processes or in the expected results. And it turns out that, like multiple issues, but the common themes are like, people can't find the documents. And if they do, documents are not really straightforward. It's not helpful. Most of the time, it's also outdated. So what I've done is that in this project, I called it Project Metamorphosis. So just putting some creativity on it. Metamorphosis is like making sure that these documents are aligned to what's really happening on the floor and what is expected from the operators. So, and also there is this like statement, I guess, saying that the documents were previously, made for them, but not with them. So it's like someone deciding that this should be the process without really consulting, like the people working closest to the process. So that's, I guess, the important key thing in here. In change doing like improvement projects, make sure to involve the people closest to the process. So what I've done as well, I made the documents more visual, accessible, make sure that like consulted with them how and where would they normally find these documents to support them well in their day-to-day work. And the results, errors dropped, the compliance as well has increased, and lesser deviations were recorded from our processes. So in terms of, like in the government section, this could be equivalent to your workflows, your policy, or a simple form that customers or, citizens are dealing with you in your different offices. How can we ensure that these are more helpful for them as they interact with us, and we deliver value for them as well? So just a little bit of more background about the project. So as I mentioned, the previous state of the documents, they were outdated, they were overlapping and confusing, and what we want to achieve is to make them as useful, compliant, and reliable. The methodology that I've used is shown in this slide. So, identifying area or the scope, doing process confirmation, testing the documentation based on those simple metrics that I have mentioned, and doing some iteration on how we can further improve those procedure with them in the process. So to give you a little bit of more how I've done it. So this is a typical like life cycle or a process map of how medicines are made. Like generally, you have these key steps. In this particular example of a document I've worked with, I focus on the in-process checks. So in this particular area, this is where you're gonna do your inspection of the medicines, make sure that visually you don't see any floating particles and things like that. Um, so we had procedures regarding those inspections, but what I've done in terms of, like selecting the area of scope, that's what I have selected because firstly, in terms of the risk associated with it, if it's not done properly, then, there is more chances of having, like effects down the line that we wouldn't want, especially if it impacts the life of our patients. So I've selected that particular area. And then second step is doing a process confirmation. So in that company, we had a template on how to do process confirmation. But to make it simple in your own respective areas, what you can do is if it's currently documented, just grab that procedure, use that, try to follow those steps listed in the document, and if it's reflecting, what's currently happening in your area or your process, then it's still updated. But if it's not, that's where we will need to do some investigation, whether we need to update our procedure because of, like better practices, or it's just that through time people doing the job is, not aligned to what we're expecting. So yeah, that's how you can do your process confirmation. And also it's always good to have someone that is, like a person actually doing the job rather than just doing like, like a desktop kind of observation. So have someone that's doing the work with you and have them walk you through in the process. So in terms of the iteration that I have done in terms of improving things, again, it's doing something or things with them and not for them. So always involve them in the process. It's always good to get the engagement of people through getting their feedback in terms of improving things. So for example, in this activity or project, I've created a simple survey with key metrics such as useful, compliant, and reliable. So I've created a mini survey, has asked key operators, or I would say influencers across each shift to make sure that, like the voice of the customer is represented well, and have those drafts rated by them and doing the iteration based on their feedback, and before ultimately coming up with the final product, which is, like the documents that we would be ultimately publishing. So having that activity ensured that there is engagement coming from the shop floor, from the process, direct from the people involved in the process, so that you could make sure that resistance is not going to be there in time for doing the change management process. So this is also just an experiment card that I've used where, defining what the customer problem is, what is your goal, what's your hypothesis, and what's the plan. So yeah, this is just an example of that experiment card. So that's the first project that I can share with you on how to make sure that, like a project or a change or a continuous improvement exercise remains or is sustainable with your stakeholder. The key takeaway in there is that make sure that we involve our stakeholders in the journey so that they know what the why is, like it's now a common term of like start with why and then the how and the what. But really, as cliche it might sound now, it's really, really important that people knows the reason behind it and they are involved in the journey. The next project that I can share with you is when I work with a company in the packaging industry in Australia. The task for me was to develop a lean capability framework to enable stakeholders, not just on the leadership level, but more so on the individual contributors level. So in here, I have developed modules in terms of what simple concepts in the lean area would be beneficial for our teams to have. So you have lean awareness, visual performance management, standard work, 5S, and problem solving. So, you could learn all of these jargons and terminologies in the lean area, but in the framework I've created, I've summarized them into these 5 key modules that each of the levels in the company should be able to have. So out of those, I was able to create some lessons or workshops and training areas or sessions for those levels in the organization. Um, but I guess in all of these, like how pretty or how amazing your framework would be, if you don't have the leadership buy-in, it wouldn't fly. So what I've done in here is that I made sure that in the process of creating the framework, I closely work with the leadership team as well, make sure that the reason behind we're doing this is clear for them, and what's the cost of not doing it this way. So by making sure that the leadership team is part of the journey, you would have your proper sponsorship, and along the process, they could influence as well their own respective direct reports in the company. So I guess the key takeaway in this part of like example is that aside from involving people on the shop floor level or the people closest to the process, it's also important to make sure that the leadership team really understands the vision of why this project is needed at this time. Because like as I mentioned, different priorities happen, leadership turnovers, all of these constraints that we are facing as continuous improvement professionals or leaders. These are the challenges that we face every time. But how can we be resilient in all those areas? We need to ensure that the leaders are always aligned with us. The priorities are aligned to what the change is about. So once we tied in, like what we're doing to those goals, then it's gonna be clear for them, and it's also gonna be easier for them to sell this idea to their own direct reports. And that's how we can lessen the resistance in terms of doing change or improving things in our own processes. So in this area, it's just more of an example of what those knowledge areas are and the expected outputs. You could take some ideas in here, like lean awareness, for example, like simply having your clean and organized work areas, that would be your expected output. Once people are aware, what are the different types of wastes, and how can they practice waste management in own simple methodologies and not trying to complicate it, and embedding importance of waste busting to safety and quality, not just about cost savings and cost avoidance. Having like the lean mindset also leads to how can we make our workspaces more safe, and how can we increase the quality of our work. Visual performance management, this is more of how you can measure the success or performance of the team, because as you know, if you can't measure it, you can't really improve it. So that's really important. Standard work, this helps, like especially in times of chaos and dealing with multiple priorities. Having a leader's standard work or a standard work would help you, provide you some guidance on if all else is like chaotic, what should you be doing on a specific day, or generally what is your program for the day. So you go back to the standard work, and you can like pivot quickly to the right track. um, Having also the standard work helps you manage your team as well, especially if you are a manager and you have direct reports. It's going to help, like in terms of communicating the expectations. Having that set list of activities ensures that, this is well communicated. And if underperforming is being observed, then you have concrete basis on, like a point of discussion, rather than, like our direct reports being feeling unclear on our expectations. Having the standard work helps provide that clarity. 5S is tied in making things organized in the workplace, and problem solving. There are like simple tools that you can use in doing problem solving, like the 5 whys, fishbone diagrams, and all those tools. But at the end of the day, it's being methodical, and not really overly trying to complicate things, but making sure that if we're trying to solve something, we're really addressing the root cause of the problem and not just the symptoms of it. So yeah. So that's the second project. If I'm gonna move to the next one, I was able to work with like a big FMCG company here in Australia as well. So it's Coca-Cola, Euro Pacific Partners. This was during COVID time. So the topic that I'd like to highlight in this area is like managing change without losing momentum. So it was during COVID. I just started the role, and my objective or my mission is to make sure that teams are trained on continuous improvement, lean methodologies, and standardization overall. But I guess the biggest challenge was that, in times of shutdowns, like, oh sorry, lockdowns of the offices, and you have to work from home, like how do you ensure that you keep the momentum going um, amidst those challenges? So this particular example I am showing on the screen is when we were doing like a workshop on standard work. So, and some of you might be familiar already on this exercise. So what I've done is through the use of online meetings. We've done the workshop, um, by using like mini games. For example, in this particular scenario, I've given them like vague instruction, like without clear expectation on, like draw a pig, essentially. And having that particular exercise, they were able to do it. It's just that, as you can see from the result, it's varying. I guess the point I was trying to say with them is that, if they have a more standardized procedure to follow, then the outcomes would be more, standardized across all of them. So do you see the difference in this output versus the previous one? They have their own idea of success, as I would say, like success being the output of drawing a pig, which is the instruction, but giving them a set of instruction that is more, I guess, useful, reliable, and relevant for them, they were able to create similar outcomes. So that's what we want to achieve in the teams. So I guess in this example, the key takeaways around how do we manage change without losing momentum. So it will require some creativity from ourselves as leaders, like pivot quickly, make sure that, even though like that worst case scenario of having, like shutdowns of offices, but we still have to work, right? Like what other channels or tools we can use out there to continue the momentum. So in the advent of the technologies we have today as well, you have your online tools, digital like tools in available for us to communicate and collaborate remotely. You can use that. So yep. Um, the next project that I had is, and you would also face this. You are tasked to create, or implement a culture of continuous improvement, but without a budget or with low budget. So I had that experience of having being tasked on this kind of project in the past in one of the companies I work for, and really there's no budget about it, but the expectation is that, we implement this like change management mindset or continuous improvement mindset rather with the operators, and in this project in particular, the biggest challenge we had was that in terms of waste management, we had like two plants, but those two plants perform differently in terms of waste management. Both of them not really performing well in the beginning. But there's no ownership, there's no mindset of being aware of how they should be performing their processes day to day. And in terms of involvement in the process, they're just there time in, time out, and that's about it. So what we have done there in that company is we've developed a campaign called Partners for Change. um, we've done some exercises, like we created some sort of makeshift game rooms in the meeting rooms for a day to ensure that we have, like rather than just having a simple talk or 1 hour talk about the values that we would want them to be embedded with them, we've created some mini games and exercises with them so that it's also linked to what they should be taking away from that particular campaign. So we built, like the principles or the values that we would want to implement for them, like zero loss mindset, leveling up standards, ownership, and self-discipline. So by having, like this simple creative event for them without really having much of a big budget to implement that, we were able to create the change. And in terms of result, we were able to see the results in terms of changes in the measured wastage in that particular plants. So those particular plants that we have focused on, and operators were more aware on their responsibility and being more of an owner rather than being like a worker. They had the mindset of owning their process and taking pride on the improvements that they have built on their respective areas. So that would be the projects that I could share with you. And now we're gonna move to, like a mini toolkit that you can use, like from today or from tomorrow. What can you start doing with your own team so that you can also build this continuous improvement mindset, or improving your own processes in your respective areas. So firstly, the first step is, ask your team, what process slows you down the most? So where do you get stuck? For example, approvals or emails, or in terms of your customers, what is confusing for them? Or just working with other departments, what areas in your communication or collaboration is posing some challenges currently? So start continuous improvement by listening to frustrations, because like those could have the hidden gold mines, hidden improvement gold mines that you could start doing improvements in terms of change to improve your performance. So like again, what process slows you down the most? Maybe you start those questions, prompt these questions to your teams, and you could get like where to start with. Secondly, map one process. So just like the example I've shown you earlier in that standard operating procedures project, um, just start with one key process. I know you would have like hundreds or thousands of procedures that you should be like looking at, but in terms of on a day, what particular area is posing a lot of frustrations, or I guess in terms of a customer journey, the measure of detractors, for example, like which area or processes is giving you those negative marks. So focus on that. You can use, if the teams are physically present in an office setting, you could use, like a sticky notes or whiteboards, or if you're working remotely, you can use like Microsoft Teams or WebEx, or all those video conferencing tool that you can work collaboratively as well. um, Show the steps, like make sure that everyone is aligned and really clear on what the steps are really involved in the process. Start with the inputs and ending with the output. Also, like who supplies the input information, for example, and who consumes the output. So it's like in Lean, you have this SIPOC diagram, and you can make use of that tool to better visualize the process end to end. And then having the process documented, what you can do next is, highlight where the duplicated efforts are, highlight where are the unclear handovers, or where the bottlenecks are as well. So, like you could focus on those bursts of improvement opportunities, and that's where you could build the momentum of doing improvements or changes. So again, we have the saying of, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. There's also another variation to that. If you cannot see the process, you can't also improve it, right? So third one, fix one friction point. So simplify a confusing form, for example, combine two reports into one, or eliminate an approval that really doesn't add value. So these are just like some examples of what you can start working on. So start small and low risk, and then you'll earn trust faster. So that's also another way of, getting buy-in from stakeholders, especially if you're a newcomer joining a new company and you don't really have, like you would have the credentials or credibility from outside, but it's also good to start building your momentum like internally and with your own team, with your new team rather, by starting with big like small tasks or small projects, and through that you can earn trust from them. And then celebrate the small wins. So you don't have to like wait for the whole completion of the big project. One way to make sure that the team is like engaged throughout the journey is celebrating the wins. Make sure that the efforts of people who got involved in the improvement journey is recognized. And like just sending a simple thank you email. You don't have to like buy gifts and all that. By simply thanking them or appreciating them, like this example I have here, post a before and after in your kitchen or in your SharePoint. If if the improvement is something that could be visually seen, you can do that as well. So recognition builds momentum. People support what they help build. So that's how we can continue the momentum as well. Repeat the habit. So in your weekly meetings, if you do have, or daily huddle, for example, it would be good to have, at least a little bit of maybe 5 minutes to include a discussion or talk about continuous improvement, like some sort of good practice sharing or best practice sharing amongst each team. You could also invite, other team members from different department, for example, to share best practices from them that you could use in your own respective teams. So you could do that. And also it's good to have, like a board that would show what we have improved, for example, what we have improved board. And that would also gain some momentum or like interest and engagement from our team members to be part of your improvement journey. So, continuous improvement isn't just an event, right? Like a one-day event. It should be a continuous part of everyday work. So, like we have BAU or business as usual tasks as every day, but it will be good to have an opportunity to create value or to remove non-value adding activities on our day-to-day activities. Yeah. And then repetition until it sticks. So further readings, if you are more interested to read more about resources, especially in the government sector, you could use these like references um, in the screen. So yeah, that would be my suggestions. And yeah, so embedding a culture of continuous improvement that sticks. Like as I mentioned from the beginning, we all similar to the private sector, and it's going to be the same to the public sector. We are continuously faced with a lot of challenges, leadership turnovers, no budget at all to low budget, resistance from our stakeholders. All of these things are part of life or part of our professional journey. But continuous improvement should be our compass to do all of this noise. And by having this mindset, we would always go back to like the why. Why are we doing this? And what's the value that we can drive out of these like changes or improvement exercises, and through that in the times of like being not clear on why are we doing this, that's gonna help us be centered again to continue moving forward. So yeah, again, that's my experiences in the private sector, and I hope you could, apply one of these projects in your own respective areas, so that continuous improvement journey sticks, whatever happens in terms of challenges we face every day. So yeah. I can see some questions in here. Will the slides be shared with you? Yep, I can send a copy of these slides to Dr. Ronda for it to be shared to everyone in the call. Yep, I have received a question from Derek. What are some of the things you've done personally when you receive pushback? So I think, like as I mentioned, in being a professional in the continuous improvement line of field, like pushback or resistance is always there. It's expected, and my approach in this is always going with like what's the reason why we are doing this change or project, and making sure that it's well communicated to the stakeholders from the shop floor team members up to the leadership level. And like if that is really clear, the value is well communicated, then the resistance or the chance of having pushbacks would be lower. So we cannot avoid it, but the idea here is to make sure that you take the people with you in the journey of change.
Okay, your lips have stopped moving, so I'm assuming you're ready for the next question, Freddie. So I
Yeah,
think
sure. Yeah.
maybe we usually have this great mix of people, those who are just starting out on their continuous improvement journey and those who are probably fallen to the experts, such as yourself. might there be one thing they can take away from your talk to start tomorrow or the next week as they're looking to implement some of these practices? How about if we start with our junior people first and then move over to what could a senior do with your information? Freddie, please.
Yep, thanks, Dr. Rhonda. So yeah, so if you are a newcomer to the industry, you're just starting your career in the continuous improvement journey, and that's myself in probably in the 8 years ago, 10 years ago. That's me starting my career as well. I think what I could say to myself, my younger self back then, is always work with the people always involve them in the process. Make sure that you are feedback orientated and take those feedback not personally, but more of like how you could make use of those feedback to make your output or your process better. So by taking people in the process, taking them with you will really help out lessen the resistance when you're doing the change management journey with them. And as for the senior leaders in the company in terms of implementing changes, um, empathy, I think, is the key lesson that I would say or share with them. By having empathy to your stakeholders, you're basically deciding not because of your own knowledge, but more of the sake of your own team, your stakeholders, and the company, including the shareholders as well. So having that holistic view of empathizing, making sure that the pain points are really addressed, and not just because we want to do something out of nowhere, but there is a linkage to creating more value, fixing the pain points, and that would be my suggestions. I do have another question here from Emmett. I'll just read it. I have seen similar in my change. Yep. Any tips for motivating engineers in the government sector? A challenge as a CI professional has been that engineers that want to do things their way versus a standard. Yeah. Like engineers, any professionals at all, I think the key idea is, like especially engineers always think about methodically of something. There's always like a reason why of why you're doing that. It's always good to be data driven, especially if you think that there is a benefit or value if you're doing it this way and not that way. Data is key in these scenarios. If you could prove, like doing a simple small experimentation or a simple trial, then you would have a basis on the results expected if you do things or change things this way, right? So data is key, and yeah, that would be my answer to that. You're welcome.
Okay, here's another question for you. So we have sometimes two different categories of people in for change management, process improvement, continuous improvement, and innovation. We have those that fall into the kind of the platforms and the process side, and then we have those that may fall into like the policy and the people side of the house. And we're combining those usually across the project to get the best outcomes. Could you just share about maybe from your projects or your expertise how you might hone in on continuous improvement from each of those perspectives, please, Freddie?
Yep. So one of the projects I've worked in the past, and also like current project I'm working with, is an ERP transformation. And in a big project like that, you would have, like your continuous improvement manager, you would have your change manager, transformation manager, all these different hats that people take on like for a big project like that. So I think the important concept or thing in this scenario is that like communication always needs to be have like an alignment amongst all these like managers or individuals or professionals. One cannot work in silo. So it's always good to have, or it we always should have like an underlying like north star of like this is our mission, and each individual as part of this project would have their own like key underlying missions. But at the end of the day, these should all be aligned to one another. If you are a change manager, of course, you would, like manage the change, right? Like in terms of how you can bridge the current state to the future state. But then if you don't have the process orientation or the technical knowledge on this particular business process, then that's where you leaned into your business process manager, for example. And then your business process manager on the other hand would lean onto the change manager on how you can better implement the change. So it's like there's a dependency in the process. Key thing is clear communication and don't work in silos. So continuous improvement is a journey, and it's not just done by one person. It's a team effort. And yeah, that is key. Collaboration, communication. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe another one, Freddie, might be, you put up so much phenomenal information with regard to standardization, and then you really showed some innovative ways to engage the people in your studies, kind of globally and or industry wise. Are you seeing, who might be leading the pack, so to speak, in the methodologies or tools that they're using for continuous improvement? And then maybe is there a geographic region that's really prolific at promulgating their thought leadership or their research that you feel our attendees could take away, Freddie?
Yep. So I think, like the concept of continuous improvement, like the lean in the past, like it was started like in Japan, like the Japanese pioneers on this concept. But I think nowadays this has been, like brought into all the different regions of the world, and you would see a lot of these innovations or methodologies happening in across the world, really. So in terms of like the industry I work with, like maybe I can share with you a little bit of background about the research I'm currently working with at Western Sydney University. I currently work on the use of AI in optimizing manufacturing efficiency. And just on that sector alone, in the construction built environment, I've seen a lot of innovations coming from the, like Asia Pacific region, in the European regions, in the American regions as well. So it's all across the world, and it's good to see that, not just in one area like manufacturing, in that particular like area of my in my research like sector, we're seeing this shift of mindset of like how can we, for example, like housing or yeah, in the housing industry, how can we apply the manufacturing process of seeing the houses not as a prototype but more of a product. So that's one way of applying like different ideas on doing improvements. So this particular example, by seeing it differently rather than like making houses as a prototype or a different project each time, the concept is how can we use this principle of manufacturing and see houses as a product rather than like an experiment every time. So through that, the expected significance would be around like faster lead time in house developments, in construction, and also in the defects category. Those would be all lessened. So in terms of like innovations or in the continuous improvement space, I've seen it in a lot of different industries. And with that particular example, coming from like lessons learned in the car manufacturing being brought into the housing industry, into the platforms thinking, that's one example of it. So yeah, I think it's well spread across the world, and really like anyone right now, with the advancement of AI methodologies as well, I think the tools are ready for us to be used and exploit. And like anyone really can apply these like change management or tools in order to improve our processes. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Freddie. Okay, maybe one more. Um, you know, as you're looking at out to 2030, Freddie, where do you feel the seminal changes are going to be with regard to how or practitioners or organizations undertake continuous improvement? Is there a technology, a skill, an area that we are really going to need to double down on going forward that'll drive the greatest innovations in this area?
Yeah, definitely. Especially it's 2025, but who knows in 10 years' time, right? Like 5 to 10 years' time, what kind of technology we would have. But I think, whatever comes our way, like in the future, the important thing is being open-minded in the technologies that we are receiving, also being, like able to pivot quickly and adapt to these changes. Um, because I think, like for example, AI right now in this time, AI really, if you use it to your advantage, you would be able to make your work, like easily or more efficiently rather. It's not to see it as something that would replace us, but something that would be able to work for us to make our lives easier. Like similar to the, like things in the past when cars are made, when internet was created, there is some sort of fear behind this technologies. But after, like few years or decades after that, it's also now part of our lives. So it's the same thing we're seeing right now is, like AI is coming in with the fear of change or replacing humans in the workforce. But seeing it that way, I think the other way of seeing it is how can we utilize it to make our lives better? How can it make our professional experience more efficient so that we could create more time, more value, with our family and still delivering the same level or even more level of productivity and quality of work. So I think the key thing in there is aside from having the technical skills. The other thing is being adaptive and flexible and agile in terms of using these tools that are being more available for us towards the years and the decades to come.
Thank you so much. Okay. Any final questions if you want to put them in the chat for our speaker? Okay, I have one more then for you, Freddie. Perhaps going forward, what's the one thing you would like to challenge our attendees and or people listening to the recording to undertake, either take back to their organizations or pilot something or try something? What might be the most important thing they can do over this next week or month or quarter that you feel would help them move forward the fastest from the information you've shared with them?
Yep, thanks for this, Dr. Rhonda. Yeah, so actually from tomorrow, I would challenge everyone that has received this information today, start something small, something that is, a process that's close to you, and quickly analyze that process. What are the pain points? And if you have a small team as well that you work with, like over lunch, for example, or, like over a quick meeting during your weekly catch-ups, mention, like how can we or how you can fix these pain points so that you can deliver more for your customers, your stakeholders. So yeah, I think the challenge is clear. Um, Not complicated, not try to, like fix everything in one night, in one day, in one week. Choose something small, start something small, build momentum with your team, not just with yourself, but with your team, so that you start this journey. Like what we want to achieve is we want the continuous improvement culture stick, like in your respective teams, right? So it's not just gonna stick if it's just with yourself, it's going to stick if it's done by all your team members. And you could be the catalyst that could start that tomorrow because it's nighttime there now, right? So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I have no further questions. So I think we're going to wrap it up now. Let me just reshare my window here. And so without further ado, let's all of us who are in attendance and listen to that just really welcome and thank Fredie More Pablo for From Private to Public, embedding a culture of continuous improvement that sticks. We're so grateful for all the phenomenal information that you shared with us, tips, techniques, the toolkit, and this really forward-looking approach to how people can take all of your phenomenal information and apply it as soon as they're able. So again, on behalf of the Innovation Division and our Government Division, our Innovation Officers are Mr. Tracy Owens, Miss Jackie Jolly, Miss Sonia Montera, Miss Rebecca Mott, Mr. Larry Miller, and myself as your event chair, and our government folks, Miss Fredie Patel and Mr. Jarrett Perlow, and Miss Jackie, and Miss Sonia Montero. So we are so grateful for each of you to be able to share your expertise and creating this 2025 lineup and supporting all of our speakers and programs. Thank you to our innovation leaders and to our government division leaders. If you are interested in joining either of the teams, innovation, you can reach to Mr. Tracy Owens, and or if you have interest in joining government division for volunteer, you can reach out to Ms. Fredie Patel, our chair, or Mr. Jarrett Perlow, our chair-elect. If you're interested, we are now taking 2026 speaking proposals for both organizations, and I will send that link out in the email. Again, the best way to connect with us is through our My ASQ portals, innovation and or government, respectively. If you're interested in understanding all the phenomenal research that goes on behind the scenes, you can look up ASQE Insights on Excellence, where they do a phenomenal job of looking at continuous improvement, innovation, and many other topics of research in their geographical and industry-wise studies. If you are not a member of ASQ or ASQE, we invite you to join us. And then we invite you to attend one of our future events. On December 11th of 2025, we'll have global assessment of the current state of organizational excellence with Mr. Dale Weeks. And we have a phenomenal 2026 lineup getting started to kick off for you. So again, on behalf of ASQ Innovation Division and ASQ Government Division, we wish you a happy holiday season, very much good health and good wealth to each of you, and we look forward to seeing you again in December. Thanks again to our wonderful speaker, Fredie. We are so grateful for you, and to all of our valued attendees. Good night, everybody, and have a safe and healthy and wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone.